You heard this voice earlier. You heard the man who came to his wife's rescue, and then what you told her to quit kicking you?
In bed, yes.
In bed, okay. So they've been married, how long now?
Since April.
Since April. So they're newly married, and they're a wonderful couple, and we love having them here very, very, very much. He is a fun-loving guy. He laughs, and the world laughs with him. And he's going to tell a story about fruitcake. And that took me back to my dad. My dad liked fruitcake, and because of that, every year I look at fruitcake and say, am I going to buy it this year or not? Because I'll eat it some, but I can't get through a whole fruitcake. And he explained to me more about that today. So I would like to have you invite to our stage a friend, a new friend of my life, Wallace Sheely, please.
Thank you, Bruce. I was inspired to tell this story by Donald Davis. I don't know if you remember, but at this storytelling festival, he recounted some stories about all of the tellers that had gone before. And in that anecdote session, he recounted a story that he had told us right after Catherine Wyndham passed away at the very first festival after she was gone. And he reminded me of my Aunt Wink. This is what he said, and I'll tell you about Wink and her fruitcakes as we go along. Donald said that Catherine had been at the festival and had realized that she had run out of the secret ingredient in her fruit sliders that she always served at her New Year's party. Now, I lived in Alabama for a time, and Catherine and I had traveled back and forth on the airplane as we traveled to Jonesboro, and I knew about those fruit sliders firsthand. But I didn't know Donald's backstory. Donald said she was here at the festival and said to somebody that she had run out of moonshine and she needed it to make her sliders, or there wasn't going to be a New Year's party. Donald said that she poured half the moonshine into a bottle of Gatorade with just a little orange Gatorade in the bottom, and she gave the other half to be kept here, and she waltzed into the airport right through security. The Catherine Wyndham got to walk through security, and sure enough, the fruit sliders one more time were on that January's menu. This is why it reminded me of my Aunt Wink. Winterford was her official name, but we all called her Aunt Wink. That is family. Everybody else in the world that I knew that knew her called her the fruitcake lady. Now, it wasn't necessarily because she was crazy, although that's a possibility. Now, she had come up in the Columbia, South Carolina Debutante Society, and so she was some woman of means. She's probably the only woman of means in my family. And I had discovered that the truth of the matter is that when you're a person of means, you are not eccentric. I mean, you're not crazy, you're eccentric. Now, I can prove this to you. I worked for Ross Perot for a time, for a long time, when EDS first started. Now, he's that guy that ran for president many years ago and had the funny-looking ears. Well, that was Ross. Well, Ross wasn't crazy. He was eccentric. Every Christmas, he had this 30-foot-tall fir that was outside the front gate of the office that they decorated with the most elaborate Christmas decorations. They moved and they turned and they whirled, and down below it were little men that marched with a German dollhouse, and they came out on the hour and did their little dance. It was the most elaborate Christmas theme, pre-computer era automation. It was amazing. Now, shortly after Christmas, the grounds crew had noticed that the bottom boughs on the Christmas tree were turning brown, and they were concerned about it. So they brought in 2 expert arborists from different places in the country, one from where the tree was raised and one from right there in Dallas. Now, the arborists consulted with each other and determined that the reason the bottom boughs were turning brown was on account of the fact that there wasn't enough light getting up and air getting up and underneath the tree. So they had the bottom boughs cut back till about, if you were squatting, you could get under the tree. Now, several months passed till the heat of summer. And in the heat of summer one day, in his little golf cart, one of the groundskeepers made a serious mistake. He pulled up underneath that Christmas tree to eat his lunch as Ross was pulling in the front gate. And he noticed for the first time that his Christmas tree had been cut. He immediately went into the office, called his team together and said, "You understand something? A Christmas tree is not a Christmas tree if the boughs don't touch the ground. Who has cut that tree?" He had 2 groundskeepers fired that day. The one that had ordered the tree cutting and the one who was sleeping underneath it when he noticed. And then he sent to Oregon for another 30-foot Christmas tree with the boughs that went all the way to the ground, had this one dug up and moved to the back side of the property, and the new one installed in time for the heat of August when it's always over 100 degrees. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not crazy. That is eccentric. Because $1 billion buys eccentricity, less than that could buy crazy. So therefore, my aunt was not crazy. She was eccentric. She was famous for her fruitcakes. She made hundreds upon hundreds of fruitcakes every year. We all got fruitcakes with her special secret fruitcake recipe. She would call the grandchildren and the nephews and the nieces to come up in the summertime when it was picking season for the fruit. She had us cut that fruit open and peel it, and you know what zesting is? She had us zest all the oranges and the lemons and prepare them for preparation in the secret sauce. Now, as a young person, I was never allowed to consume the secret sauce. But I tell you, I think it was vodka. I'm not sure of that. But she certainly did prepare her fruit. And then it came time for the cherries to come from Wisconsin, and you had to pick the stems and get the pit out of every single cherry to prepare it. That all happened in June, July, August. By the time September rolled around, it was time for the actual preparation of the fruitcake dough. Now, in fruitcake, there's not a lot of dough, but you have to have enough to hold it together. So she would prepare the fruitcake dough, and each person was entitled to their custom recipe. I loved sugar. So my candy was always kids' candy fruit. It was just wonderful. It melted in your mouth. Other people had, cheesecloth that you put on the top, and they put your favorite spirit upon the top of the fruit cake. One year, there had been a calamity when they had almost arrested her when they came to pick up the stuff because you weren't allowed to send alcohol through the mail without a permit. The next year, she had one of these fancy hermetically sealing machines to cover up her fruitcakes with so that you couldn't tell what was in them in the boxes. Now, the one rule was, when you got a fruitcake from her, if you ever wanted another one, you had to return that box to her with something in it during the year. Hundreds probably 1,000 people return those boxes every year. She would sit and bake and make the custom recipe for everybody. Oh, you don't like cherries? I'll leave that out. And in a room that she had added on the house for the perfect temperature, for that soaking and marinating of all of the spirits, she had them with people's names on them lined up and the boxes addressed, and everything was ready. The week before Thanksgiving, she would finish the fruitcakes and she would sit at her desk and she would write personal letters to each person with their Christmas card. And the Christmas card would go in the top of the box. And the day after Thanksgiving, on that Friday morning, the UPS driver would arrive at her house for the biggest pickup he had of the holiday season. And he always got his own special fruitcake. Now, the truth of the matter is, she'd done this a lot of years. She was 102 years old and still making fruitcakes. They went everywhere. They tell me that the Bishop Nicholas Cathedral orders their fruitcakes from my aunt, or at least did at the time. Everybody that was anybody had had one of her fruitcakes. It was an amazing thing. She knew she had arrived in the world when her fruitcake recipe was published in Southern Living magazine. That was a big deal. That was second only to her debutante appearance, the biggest deal in her life. And then the time came to ship those out. The guys would come and help her fold and seal and get everything ready. And she obeyed the official rule. Your Christmas letter and your Christmas card must be mailed on the day after Thanksgiving, or it is tardy. It is in the arrears. Now let me tell you, I never got my letters out until January. So I was always seriously in the arrears. We had all gathered at her house for her wonderful Thanksgiving dinner when she cut the official fruitcake. And we went and all sat around the table, had the most wonderful meal. It was 102, and she said she was 102, and she said she was slowing down a little bit. Well, she went out after cleaning the dishes, and we all helped her, and she settled down in front of the TV to watch the big game. I don't really remember which big game it was at the time, but it was one. And as she rested there, she came to a rest. She passed on. The family was all gathered, so they decided it was critically important that they have the funeral while everybody was there. Well, now the funeral director got a fruitcake every year, so he was right over to the house, even though it was Thanksgiving Day. And 2 days later, she had been prepared, and they were having the memorial service at the church. And about the time they went off to church, up in the driveway pulled the UPS guy. And he said, "You did not call the house yesterday for the fruitcake pickup. We are concerned." And he came right to the house. They explained what happened. It hadn't been time to get the word out. That the fruitcake lady had been cremated, and there were some special directions. And the UPS guy said, "Don't worry. We'll get everything packed up. Y'all go on, have your meal, do all the things that you're going to do. We'll take care of it." Her daughter said, now there were some special instructions. She wanted to be spread in all the places her fruitcake had been. So there on the counter were some vials that hadn't been used. The guy said, UPS guy said, "I will take care of this, no problem." Well, he took it all together, started addressing labels, said, "There's got to be a better way." And he took those little glass vials and realized it fit perfectly down in the center of the fruitcake. So he filled those little tiny urns up with her remains and put them right down in the center of the fruitcake, done sealed up the boxes and sent them forth into the world. Now, after a good night's sleep, her daughter got up and went to her desk to clear things off the next day and realized that on the table there was all 300 and some odd Christmas cards and the letters and all the invoices and everything. They were supposed to have been slipped in the top of each box. It hadn't happened. In that letter was the announcement that the fruitcake lady had passed away. She rushed them to the mailbox so they could catch up with the fruitcake. But they didn't arrive in time. So many of my family and friends opened those fruitcakes and said, "Wonder what this is. It must be some topping for the fruitcake," and spread it on top of the fruitcake, consumed it. I guess my aunt got her wish. She got spread all over the place where her fruitcakes were. But the most interesting part of the story is she was always seeking attention. And on the Sunday before Christmas, a famous newspaper publisher had gotten word of the story. And Bob Terrell of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram recorded these facts as best as I tell you, that my Aunt Winifred had indeed been spread all over the world thanks to her cremains and her fruitcakes. She was, and probably still is, the most famous fruitcake lady in the world. Now, some people question the truth of what I have to say, but I tell you, Bob Terrell would not publish a falsehood, and it is indeed in the Fort Worth Telegram that year, Star-Telegram that year, and in every single paper that was in his network. The fruitcake lady had been spread far and wide.
Well, that settles it for me this year. No fruitcake. All right, we're going to take just a short break.